Hello and welcome to another edition of the C Squared Podcast. I'm Curtis and I'm here with my co-host, Aaliyah, and we are here today to talk with Justin Roth, who is not only a member of Workhorse, he's also a tour manager and he wears a lot of hats in the industry. He's been doing this for a while, and we're going to be talking to him for the next 45 minutes-ish about his different roles in the industry, interrogate him a little bit, put him under the spotlight, and hopefully have a good time. So thank you for being here, Justin, first of all.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And for the very first question, it's going to go over to Aaliyah.
Hey, Justin. It's so nice to meet you.
You too.
Could you give our listeners a little summary of your history in the metal realms and what it is that you do?
So, as
a little more
Curtis
detail
mentioned,
than what Curtis said. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, as Curtis mentioned, I am the guitar player, songwriter of Workhorse, one of the guitar players. And, we've been a band for about 8 years now, I guess. And through that, I've sort of branched out and become a guitar tech, tour manager, wear many hats. And then I also do some work with small bands. I've run a screen printing business for about 13 years. So I've handled a lot of drop shipments, merch, sort of just got my hands on a little of everything. So, yeah.
Wow, you could really do everything. So with the tour managing stuff, we've been pretty much on hiatus for like 2 years now. Thankfully, they're coming back. But can you share a little bit about what you've been up to during the tour hiatus?
Drinking a lot of coffee and watching a lot of YouTube. Honestly, it's I was going to joke when Curtis brought up touring. I was just going to say, like, what is touring? I kind of forgot. But it's just, we've taken this opportunity as a band, Workhorse, to just work on new material. We did the Slay at Home thing. We signed a new deal, which was cool. And really just sort of foundational stuff. There's not a whole lot you can do other than sit around, watch the news, and hope it gets better. So, yeah. We recently, with things picking back up, so I mean, we did do Full Terror Assault. That was one festival that happened. And I did a couple dates with Exodus. We did Psycho Las Vegas. We did Full Terror Assault as well with Exodus. So yeah, slowly but surely, things are starting to happen again.
Curtis, you had a question?
Yeah, I did, but then Justin went and said that he played the festivals. I was going to say, didn't they just do the festivals? And he brought it up already, so I'm good.
He answered your question.
Yeah, Full Terror Assault. I was pretty confident that was going to happen. The campground that they do that at, it's the Cave in Rock, Illinois campground. Comically, it's where they did the Gathering of the Juggalos for a long time. But the place is massive. I mean, you could put 50 to 100,000 people in there, and they could stand 50 feet apart, and you wouldn't run out of space. So, yeah, it was
that's perfect.
Pretty cool. Yeah, outdoor stuff seems to be a little less prone to cancellation, I guess, than the indoor stuff.
Totally makes sense. So you are a tour manager, and you have been for a little while. Can you go into a little definition of what it is a tour manager does from a practical standpoint?
From a practical standpoint, you're the guy who, well, let's clear some things up. Everybody thinks the tour management is just what happens on the road. So there's actually a lot more to it. I mean, you're the guy who's advancing the shows. You're basically the liaison between the band's management, the band, so the people you represent and work for, and then all of the promoters, the shows themselves. So everything from making sure that hospitality and travel arrangements and everything are squared away before you leave, to make sure that the tour goes smooth, to handling the day-to-days, making sure the band gets where they need to go, make sure the driver knows where to take them, make sure that everything's at the venue when you get there, to making sure that the show goes smooth, you get paid, your merch is accounted for. So you're kind of the day-to-day business manager when the band's manager is not present.
Curtis?
Yeah, so just as a follow-up to that, can you kind of go over how it might overlap with the management, if at all?
There's a fair amount of overlap, and depending on the size of the band, you either work directly with the band's manager a lot of times, or like I say, you're almost like the substitute best thing they have at the time when you're in the middle of nowhere with no cell phone coverage and somebody needs to fix a problem. I mean, you're there, you're the guy, so you step in and you fix the problem.
So what do you think is the first personnel that a band should get? Should they get a manager first, or do they get a tour manager first?
I think it
Which do you think comes
depends.
first?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where you're at as a band. I think a lot of bands think they need a manager when in reality they need a little bit of consulting, or they need a publicist, or they need somebody who can get them to the point where they need management. So I think a lot of up and coming bands that are going to listen to this that think they need a manager, I don't think they're quite ready for that yet. And I think when you first start to tour, and this is how I got into tour managing, to be clear, I've been in working bands that have been, playing out of town gigs and touring for the better part of 2 decades now. So you go out and you take your bumps and you learn how shows work, and you learn how things operate. And then maybe, you get into the tour management thing. But I don't think a lot of bands need a tour manager. I think a lot of bands need one responsible guy in the band who's capable of getting them to the show and making sure that things operate and that they get paid. So yeah, I think a lot of bands, you'll know when you're there,
How well, I mean, what are like some landmarks that bands can look for to know that they're there?
If you're at a point where you're touring more than twice a year, if you're doing big tours, if you're touring with another band who has a tour manager, there's a good chance that you may be ready for one. But a lot of DIY tours and a lot of smaller club tours, I don't think you necessarily need a tour manager. But when you get big enough that there's a fair amount of money involved in logistics and drop shipments of merch, and when you have a crew to manage, I mean, really that's one of the biggest things is the tour manager. You've got to account for guitar and drum techs, you've got to account for lighting guys and sound guys and merch people, and once you have personnel, you need somebody to sort of run the personnel. So if somebody in the band isn't going to step up and do it, then you may be ready for a tour manager.
One thing I do want to point out too is you guys didn't get a manager until 2017, 2018, I think, after you guys had already had a few things out, correct?
That sounds probably, yeah, you probably know better than me at this point. So yeah, that sounds close.
Now, can just to, because we're on the topic a little bit and we were just talking about it because it is a frequently asked question. What was the thing that made you kind of realize you needed to start getting management versus self-managing, other than what you've already talked about? Because there's a little bit more to it, I think, that you didn't touch on.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you get to the stage where you start dealing with contracts, that's one thing. A lot of bands are not equipped to handle some of the industry facing stuff, the behind the scenes stuff. And you want somebody who's been there before. You definitely don't want to take chances with things like contracts. So even if you go out and get a freelancer and you get somebody like an entertainment lawyer or somebody to look over your paperwork, that's very important to make sure that you don't get screwed. And the thing with having a manager, we're managed by Craig and Lum of he played in Exodus for a while. He's main songwriter in Heathen. Cragen's an awesome guy. He's part of the Aim High management group. So other bands, Exodus and Gruesome and Death Angels, a lot of people under that umbrella. You get opportunities, like things come to you. They can knock on doors that maybe you could try to knock on, but maybe a lot of companies will not be responsive to. So it's nice. I mean, once we got management, that opened up opportunities for like, product endorsements and, just things that, ESP Guitars, for example. How many times a day does somebody, email ESP Guitars and say, hey, I want an endorsement? And they're like, hey, kid, so does everybody else. But if you have somebody who has those relationships set up, and you have somebody that can knock on those doors and represent you and put a better foot forward than maybe you would on your own, then that's very beneficial. Not to put it on every manager's shoulders to go out and get product endorsements. That's definitely not their primary function. But just things like that as an example. It's just there's a lot of doors that get open when you have a manager that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's a key point too, is a manager who knows what they're doing, because a lot of times people will just hire like their brother or a buddy to do the management and they don't have a fucking clue what they're doing. Yeah,
and at that point in time, there's no point having a manager, really. I mean, if you're not going to hire somebody who's a professional who has a resume, then there's no sense in having a manager. I think it's more dead weight and one more mouth to feed, and there's really no point in having it at that point.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's all the follow-up I had on those ones, so I'll let Leah take back over.
Okay. So yeah, it just sound like the thing that we all know here is that bands should do as much as they can on their own until they're at the point where they're ready to hire on these people. And so for bands that are booking their own tours, do you have any pro tips that you could offer them?
The number one thing that I could say when you're booking DIY tours, and God knows I've done tons of this, make sure that your communication is crystal clear with the promoter. Make sure that your terms are in writing. Make sure that you're doing everything you can up front before you leave the house to make sure that the tour is going to work, function, flow. Make sure you've got your route mapped out. You make sure your budget's figured out. I mean, that's probably the number one thing. How many bands go out on tour, and you hate to plan for the worst case scenario, but you kind of have to, and one promoter stiffs you or one show bombs and you didn't budget to, have gas or food money, so you end up out there broke and maybe the tour ends early or something happens. But yeah, make sure that you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's before you leave. And that's email the promoters and again, have it in writing. Make sure you can hold them accountable. Make sure you're getting your pay. Make sure you have good merch. That's something that a lot of bands really overlook. If you're going to go out and tour and you've got one t-shirt, you've got one black and white t-shirt, and the other bands that are playing that night have, 4 or 5 designs and they're multicolor and they're printed well, you're going to get beat up at the merch table. So you got to make sure that's what's going to fund you and keep you alive. So definitely make sure you've got good merch, and just make sure you're on the level where it makes sense to tour. I think everybody thinks that touring is what you're supposed to do to grow your band, and it's part of it, but you need to make sure you're there. So I work with a lot of the bands in my city, smaller bands, and the advice I give them is take your city and then draw a circle around it 200 miles and then hit those. And in Cincinnati, we're very lucky because, a couple 100 miles, you can hit Indianapolis, Columbus, Cleveland, you could even go to Chicago, you could go to Nashville. You've got all these markets around you. So and then hit those markets a couple of times. The first time you go, maybe the show's not great. The second time you go, if you did good the first time, more people there. The third time, a lot more people are there. And then grow that outward, then take that 200-mile radius and blow it out to 500 miles. But, do the regional thing for a while. Own your hometown for sure. If you can't fill a room in your hometown, there's absolutely no sense in playing empty rooms in somebody else's town. So yeah, just, branch out slow, create a buzz, word of mouth, do things properly, and hire a publicist. When you do your releases, make sure that people are finding out about your band before you get there. And then promote hard, make sure you're partnering with people in that city. The value of a paper flyer is one thing that I can't preach it enough. Get a street team together, get a friend or somebody that you can trust in that city on Facebook, even if you just have to make a post and ask for somebody to do it. But get those flyers in tattoo shops and in record stores and any place where your crowd hangs out, and get posters on the walls and do some actual promoting. Handshaking. You hand somebody a paper flyer, they're going to read it just to find out if it's trash or not. But if you think that you can promote a tour by getting on Facebook and blasting out event invites, like, you might as well stay home. So
just as a quick kind of follow up, because we didn't really take it up too much here, is kind of like, so can you kind of go over like why it would be that a manager or a label would want to know that you are selling out your own home base first?
Well, for one, if you have a crowd in your own town, say you can fill a modest room, say you can fill a 250 to 500 cap room in your hometown, it shows that you've put in the work, because you don't fill rooms on your first go around. So you've certainly honed your craft a little bit. You've got a crowd. Those are guaranteed album sales for the most part. If I'm a really small label, which a lot of bands, and there's nothing wrong with small labels. Sometimes small labels can be the best thing that happened to a smaller band. If you get on a little indie and you can sell 500 copies of an album, even if it's CD or tape or whatever it is, even 500 downloads, that's not bad. So if you have a good foundation, it shows that you've done something right. It gives the record label some incentive to work with you. And especially if you do the regional thing, and I can't put enough emphasis on how important that is. If you can just own your little area, and then you can, by partnering with other bands or whatever you got to do to get good shows going, and you create that buzz is only going to expand outward. So it all starts at home.
Yeah, totally. I'll be quiet.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting how this stuff comes up when I wanted to talk about it. So you mentioned small labels. Your band War Curse has been on a couple smaller labels and is now signed to a larger label.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of benefits, other than just, how do you get more sales when you're on a smaller label? Like, how does that benefit you?
I think well, there's different ways to go about it, but the War Curse way, and Curtis knows this, has always just been hard work. Honest to God, roll up your sleeves, knock on doors, and door to door, sell that thing. We did a lot of shows that weren't the best, and a lot of tours that maybe we shouldn't have even done, but we were out there, and you make the most of every opportunity. You try to impress people everywhere you go, and make them remember you. And yeah, I mean, the thing with the small label, it's a step. It shows that you were doing something good enough for somebody to invest in you. And then if you do a good job with your small label, you take care of your small label, the natural order of things, the next one will be a bigger label. And so that's what happened with us. We were on a real small independent label called Static Tension, which was a good label, great label. And from there, we signed with Svart Records, which is based out of Finland, which is a really good label. And in Europe, much bigger deal than they are in US, but that gets you better distribution. So that gets your product in, places like Amazon and Target. You're on all the big retailers, and your stuff's, you can walk into a record store and accidentally find your own album. That's when like that sort of thing starts to happen. And so, distribution's a big part of it. You get a little better budget, you get promotion. They can put eyes on you, and you better return the favor and put eyes on them. So, build a good relationship with your label. And then, yeah, from Svart, we signed to Metal Blade. So it's pretty cool.
Can I follow up really quick, Aaliyah? Yeah. Okay, so here's just a quick question I just want to ask you. So going from Svart to Metal Blade, if you're willing to talk about it, how did you kind of position that? Because you didn't have new material, you were signed on the basis of your last album via Svart, which is not normal.
I don't know if that's abnormal or not. I mean,
a lot of times it is. I mean, most bands, in my experience at least, usually have a completed new one, but you didn't have the new material when you guys signed, did you?
No, we had some demo stuff, but I mean, the thing was with Eradication, that album did incredibly well. And people talk. So we were coming off of a hot album at the time. Unfortunately, they all got canceled, but we had a lot of good tours lined up. So, we were doing the right things, and we were communicating with the right people. We almost did a deal with Metal Blade for Eradication. So like we were on their radar prior to signing the deal. But yeah, I think it was right time, right place. We were coming off of a successful album, and it just made sense.
Cool. And then one last thing I wanted to follow up on that before Leah took back over was, I know one thing that a lot of labels look for is Spotify, which you guys don't have a huge Spotify, but you mainly do the sales. So how did you kind of position yourself to be like, yeah, we don't necessarily have huge Spotify numbers, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, our Spotify numbers are sad. we talk about it all the time.
Sure.
I mean, we're playing old man metal. Let's be honest. I mean, thrash metal. Our demographic. When you pull our numbers, and you may have done this at one point in time, but yeah, you pull our numbers on any of the sites or even on Spotify or any of these things. Our key demographic is like white men in their late 30s to early 50s. For whatever reason, that's our audience, and God bless them. You know what? We can't keep cassette tapes in stock. We sold a hell of a lot of vinyl, so they're buying the old man formats, and it translates to sales. I guess they don't have to stream it if they own it, and I don't know. That's the sales numbers are there, so it's like, who cares? I guess I'd rather have somebody buy my album than stream it 100 times a day. I don't really care.
Fair. Yeah. So how do you kind of take that when you're label shopping and going like, well, what do you do? Here's my sales numbers, like.
Yeah, absolutely. Fair. Yeah, if you have an album that's sold, I mean, why not?
Fair.
It's not bragging. It's just the numbers are the numbers. You can't fudge them. You just here's how many we sold, and here's how many we project to sell on the next one, and yeah.
Fair. Cool. Okay, that's what I had, Leah.
Hopefully the streaming numbers do improve. I mean, in all fairness, we are fairly lazy about promoting our streaming because again, it just seems like our demographic, it's like, if you want to listen to it, it's there. But I just feel like there's some bands that just aren't streaming bands. Our YouTube videos do pretty well, so like
Yeah.
we have a good amount of views on YouTube, but for whatever reason, Spotify, and it's so funny because I talk to our fans all the time, I mean, I'm very, very active on Facebook. They just don't use Spotify. A lot of them see it as the devil. They don't like the guy that owns it. I don't know. So it is what it is.
Sure. It's a generational thing too, and also people who are musicians know all the complexities of Spotify, so
Yeah.
they don't want to support someone that doesn't support their people, their musician friends.
And that's why I don't complain about it. Like I say, I'd rather sell them an album. I know what we make on an album versus the fraction of a penny that I'm going to make if they go stream my album on Spot. What do I care? Oh, well, I lost 8 cents today or so. Yeah, who cares?
Sure. There's definitely benefits to Spotify. It's sort of a new mentality, a discovery engine, what have you. But that's sort of connected to my next question, which wasn't exactly planned, but it came up in my mind because we're talking about labels, small labels, big labels, any label. A lot of bands these days are choosing to take a more DIY route and to do their music on their own. Do you think the trade-off, well, clearly you think the trade-off is worth it to go through a label. Can you talk about why you think it's worth it to still take the label approach?
I can see it from both sides of the table. I really do. A lot of bands who have had bad experiences with labels will tell you to go the other route, and bands that have had good experiences will tell you the opposite. To me, I think that the value in having a label behind us versus doing everything DIY, for one, I've had to do everything myself for such a long time that it's nice to just have the support. But the thing is, they have a team. They have people who've been doing this longer than I've been alive. At Metal Blade, and I have to trust that they know how to organically grow my band and promote my band better than I do. So I trust them. I want their expertise. I want their input. But yeah, it's nice to know that if I want to put something out, I can send one email, or I can text my rep, or my product manager, or whatever it is, and all I've got to do is just give it to them, and then everything else will happen. So it's that support. It's having access to, when you sign to a label, you get access to their media department. So you get video people, you get people who know how to handle all your streaming stuff and your distribution stuff. You end up with so many people. You get the machine put behind you, so to speak, and that's an invaluable amount of work and resources that I feel make it worth it to sign with a label.
One thing I do want to point out too, just as an aside though, is you also got yourself familiar with a lot of these things because you were kind of working in the industry concurrent to being in Warhurst, right? So can you kind of go over the value of kind of doing that networking and doing the different jobs you've been doing? Yeah,
I mean, the thing with I assume you're talking about work with like Morbid and Exhorder and Exodus and stuff like that. Okay. I don't know if you're talking about my professional stuff. The thing with that, you meet people and you have conversations with people, and I think what's nice is, and this is actually why I would encourage, if you're in a small to mid-sized band and you can guitar tech or you can do certain things, it never hurts to go out and get that road experience. And what it does is it gives you FaceTime with a lot of people that you wouldn't necessarily get FaceTime with. So, prior to ever even thinking that we belonged on a label, I could sit down and have a lighthearted conversation with Yop at Nuclear Blast or whoever it is, and so you get to know the people on a personal level versus coming at it from a place of, sheer negotiation. I want this, you want to give me that, and that back and forth. It's like, if you have a face to the name beforehand, it doesn't feel like such a cold call. You don't feel weird having conversations or reaching out. So I think there's definitely some merit in knowing that. And then, also the other thing is you hear the horror stories, and you hear the good stories too. It's not all negative. So, you spend time around somebody like, Gary Holt or, Trey or, Steve Tucker or any of these guys that I've, Kyle Thomas, these lifelong professionals that, that I've toured with and spent infinite amount of free time, on a bus. You got to talk about something, you know, and a lot of times this sort of stuff comes up. So you kind of see how the sausage is made before you even get to that stage, which is nice. You know what to look out for. You have these guys who have been in the game, you know, as long as I've been alive, and they can tell you, hey kid, when it comes time, don't do this, do that, you know. So you, as much as you're out there helping them, they don't even realize it, but they're really helping you, you know. So you're getting some insight, you're getting advice from people that have been there that money can't buy, you know. You can watch all the TikTok and YouTube nonsense you want, but there's nothing like having a off camera, unscripted, unfiltered conversation with somebody like, you know, a Gary Holt or a Trey or somebody that just has been there, you know, a legend. And yeah, I think that definitely, it changed my perspective on a lot of things. And, you know, I was all ears. I'd listen to anything those guys had to say and, you know, take it to heart.
So one more thing I got before Leah kind of goes over. Can you kind of go over, and without getting into anything specific, obviously, can you kind of go over who you should be looking to for advice on these type of things, since you kind of said there's nonsense and there's not non-nonsense?
Oh, that's the hard part, you know, and I think that's life in general right now, is cutting through the noise. What is real? What is fake? What is bullshit? You've got all these fake gurus out there that make, you know, 20 videos a day on how to become a millionaire, how to become the next star in your genre, how to become this, that, and the other. And a lot of those guys are full of shit. I think, me anyway, I think I've been around long enough, I can spot a bullshitter from a mile away. And I'd like to think that other people are at least somewhat capable of doing it. But ask to see some results. You know, if somebody approaches you and they want to sell you a service, or they want to manage your band, or they want to, you know, whatever it is, one, ask yourself first and foremost, what do they want from you? Is it money? Are they charging you for this? What is your return on investment going to be? Who have they worked with, and what kind of results can they show you? So, you know, there's a lot of, you just have to vet them like you would anybody else. You wouldn't hire a graphic designer, for example, without first looking at their body of work, their portfolio, and saying, what did you do for this client? What was the result of the campaign, or whatever it is, you know? So I think you just have to vet these people. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there. The music industry breeds them. You know, there's a lot of bullshitters out there who see musicians as an easy mark. You know, you're wide-eyed, you're young, you're ambitious, you want to take over the world, you want to be the next Metallica, whatever it is, and they're going to prey on that, you know. And you just have to be aware as a young musician that these people are out there, and you really have to be careful. You know, don't just blindly trust anybody because they tell you that they know what they're talking about. They might be full of shit.
Well, on top of that too, you also got to be careful for who people tell you that they know or have worked with. Because I know, for example, I met someone, I think it was a couple of years ago, who claimed that they worked for a major label, and they were trying to sell stuff to bands that they had worked with a major label. And he was literally the sandwich boy at the major label, but he was making it sound like, you know, I've worked with Universal Music or whatever it was, right? So
yeah, a lot of that stuff happens. We've got a notorious promoter in our town. He'll get these bands. It's total pay to, you know, the usual ticket scam, pay to play. He's got these kids out hustling and buying stacks of tickets to give to their parents and shit, you know, and he tells them, I'll get you on Sumerian. Actually, the funny thing was, the first time I ever talked to this clown, he told me he'd get me on Metal Blade, and I told him to fuck himself. And I'm on Metal Blade anyway, so Kevorkian can eat it. But yeah, you know, I mean, if a guy tells you that, where are your creds, man? Like, show me again, I'm all about present me with the evidence, the body of work, show me that you're not full of shit, and maybe I'll take you serious. And I just think a lot of kids, again, they're just starstruck. It's like, oh, you hear Metal Blade and you, oh shit, I want to be on Metal Blade. So you do whatever this guy asks you to do. But what other band has he gotten you? What other band has he gotten signed to Metal Blade? And never, ever be afraid. And this is one thing this is a great piece of advice. Never be afraid to reach out to other bands. So if somebody tells me so-and-so will do X, Y, Z, I'm going to say, okay, well, he says he's worked with this band. I'll ask that band, hey, how was your experience working with this guy? You know, if people have messaged me and asked me about you, Curtis, plenty of times, and I give them honest feedback, which is always good feedback, of course. But I think that's the best thing you can do to, you know, another band's not going to lie to you, I would hope.
So, not necessarily, yeah. Well, just I do tell people to go talk to you if they ever ask me, because I know you'll give an unfiltered but good recommendation.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, good feedback, bad feedback, any kind of feedback. I want to know, I want to get to the bottom of it before I give anybody my money, before I give anybody my trust. And I just think there's definite merit in like what another band has to say. So when these guys approach you and they say, I've worked for Universal. Okay, well, what bands did you work with at Universal? Okay, let me ask this band. Let me ask this band's manager. Let me message them on Instagram, whatever it is. You're going to get a reply from somebody. And I think normally it takes 5 minutes to figure out that these guys are full of shit.
Yeah, and simple Google search too also really helps a lot too. Like Google search, asking people in different bands, managers, that type of thing, and you can always find someone that knows someone that you can actually find out about, no matter what. Sorry, Leah, we went off your question, so I'll let you take it back over.
No, it's fine. I mean, this is all relevant to the conversation that I wanted to have, and that we're all, just happening organically. It's fine. I think to take it back to a more lighthearted place, I wondered if you wanted to share, like, maybe your favorite thing about being a tour manager, or the side things that aren't being in a band.
Yeah, I mean, the best part is probably, I mean, the relationships you form are definitely number one. So, befriending a guy like, Trey or, Gary Holder, one of these guys, you don't want to dork out and be like a fanboy, but let's be honest. Like, I play thrash metal. It's fucking Gary Holt. I mean, that's getting to, to spend time with somebody like that. That's definitely really cool, and like I say, you get to pick their brains and learn things, and you learn things about the band, like as a fan that you get the inside scoop on some things, and you get cool stories. So like the memories and the time you get to spend with the people you work for, it's not often that you have a boss that's even remotely as cool as Gary Holt. Probably never happen again. So stuff like that's cool. And then, the travel is cool, of course. When I was tour managing Exhorter, we did Europe, I don't know how many times, so you get to see the world. You get to go out and spend time with your friends, and you're getting paid to be on the road. And it's like a long paid vacation with some occasional work sprinkled in, some hard work. I don't want to discredit it, but yeah,
Right.
It's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories. It's no walk in the park being on tour.
No, absolutely not.
What's the hardest thing about being on tour?
That's a good question. There's a lot. I mean, the time away from home, I think, is hard for a lot of people. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, the thing with being on tour, I don't think it's for everybody. I think a lot of people go on tour and they find out what they're made of. Things like sleeping on a bus, sleeping on a moving bus every night in a tiny bunk. You're basically, it's like a luxury prison on wheels. You're smelling everybody else's feet. You're stacked 3 high like a sardine. You're sleeping next to whatever carry-on. I've got my guitar tools and just headphones and shit thrown all over my bunk. I don't know. That gets a little tough. Not everybody can even sleep on a bus. I've learned to sleep like a baby personally, but that's a little tough. You're on somebody else's schedule, which is, you eat when you have time to eat. You don't eat when you want to eat. You don't always have access to the things you want to eat. You got to make the best of it when you're in the middle of middle of nowhere, Delaware or something. You got to make do with what you got. And sadly, promoters don't always read the rider. And if you're like me and you're on a plant-based diet and you get somewhere and it's like, well, we've got salami and we've got roast beef. What do you want? And it's like, well, I guess I'm eating bread today, so you do run into stuff like that. Can be difficult, but I mean, I just think that the pros greatly outweigh the cons. So, again, if you can deal with being confined to a small space with 15 people or whatever, and work in very weird hours, and you fall asleep in one time zone, you wake up in another. You literally roll over when you feel the bus stop moving, and you hit Google Maps and you go, where the hell am I? Maybe you're in a Walmart parking lot in Boise, Idaho. Maybe you don't even know where you're at half the time, And so you gotta have that nomad spirit, I guess. But I enjoy it, so I don't really find that too tough. I think it's really kind of the personality types. You're on a bus with a whole lot of people, and maybe you got some people that like to party, and maybe you got some people that don't like to party. Well, somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose, so being able to compromise and being able to spend that much time around people confined in a small space, like I say, it's a luxury prison on wheels sometimes. So
I had just a quick question about that. So considering the fact that you don't drink or do drugs, how do you tolerate all the partying and shit that sometimes I'm sure happens sometimes on some of these tours?
just been around it long enough, and
Yeah.
I grew up around it, and it's nothing new. But I do think there's a huge benefit in being the sober guy on tour, especially if you're the tour manager. The last thing I would want as a musician is a partying tour manager. I'm always sober. I can always communicate with the driver. I can always wrangle the drunks and get them on the bus. And I think the whole, I've got the straight edge like I do on the road. You really do. It is an edge. It is an advantage. You don't have to worry about me. I'm not the loose cannon on the bus. So I think that's good. You always need one responsible guy out there. So I'm glad to be that guy.
It probably also helps you get the jobs too, because you can be like, I'm not going to be drinking. I'm not going to be doing anything. I'm going to be the guy who's responsible too.
I'm sure that reputation exists out in the world. I'm sure, people talk, if you're one band and you're going to hire a tour manager, again, it goes back to asking other bands, even pros do that, that was actually how I ended up working with Morbid Angel was working with Exhorter, and one guy asked the other guy, what kind of a job does this guy do? And they're going to talk, they're going to ask, they're going to vet you. So yeah, if they say, hey, this he's clean, he's straight, he's sober, whatever, I don't think it hurts.
For sure. Aaliyah, I have one more question. I know we don't have much time. Are you okay if I ask? Okay, cool. Can you kind of briefly go into just like how you actually got your first major job, if you're willing to say?
Well, by major, I would say Exhorter was the first, bigger scale, where we were doing, large festivals and international stuff. How I fell into that was, honestly, it was just being responsible. So what happened was I was part of relaunching Exhorter. We had the same manager at the time, and you probably remember it, but we did the reunion shows at St. Vitus, and then we did New Orleans. So we did a small run, and War Curse was the support band on that. What happened was those guys had very little idea what they were doing. I'll be honest. We got to the show and like they're pulling pedals out of their backpacks and throwing them on the stage, and they got cables that don't work and they have no idea what in the hell is going on. They're just kind of there, these guys, I have to assume earlier in they were one of those weird bands too. Like they're an old school legacy band, but like they didn't do a lot of touring. These guys were, for the most part, a couple of the members anywhere were fairly green. So it was pretty apparent that they needed some help. So I jumped in, we ran to Guitar Center and bought pedal boards and bought cables and fixed all their stuff and made sure that sound check went smooth and made sure the gear got where it was going. And, just through organizing all that stuff, our mutual manager was like, hey, where these guys go, I want you to go. So I was just sort of like assigned. I didn't ask to do it. Quite honestly, never wanted to do it, but it was one of those things where I was like time and place. And, I liked the guys, Jason Vibrox, who's their bassist, was at one point in time the bassist in War Curse. So, that was like kind of a family thing going on there. And yeah, so I just sort of fell into it. It was like, hey, we need somebody who I can trust. And at this point in time, I had also been doing different work. So on like my marketing side, like my design side, I had been doing professional work for ASA, who was the management group. So they knew they could trust me. They knew I had touring experience. They knew that, and the big thing was I could do the guitar tech stuff. So, I've guitar tech for Morbid Angel. I've guitar tech for Exodus. I've guitar tech for Exhorter. So like all these bands that I've toured with, I've also been the guy working on gear and making sure everything runs smoothly. So it helps to be able to, properly set up a guitar and all that sort of thing. So it just made sense. It was like they could kind of, I was a deal, I was a bargain. They got a guy who could do like 4 jobs for the price of one. So I just became the guy and they sent me out, and, like I say, people talk, and that's how I fell into the Morbid Angel thing. Steve Tucker and Jason are good friends, and Steve said, I need a tech. I need somebody that can go. And they're like, hey, our guy's available. You want to do it? So yeah, ended up working for Morbid, and again, it's just networking.
Cool. Okay. You got a final question, Aaliyah?
I do. Really quick. Can you tell us, to wrap things up, what is going on with War Curse and what should we be looking out for next?
We are hard at work on our Metal Blade debut. It's going to be probably mid 2022 as of right now. But yeah, just writing new songs. I'm very, very happy with the new material, and that's rare for me. I'm my own worst critic for sure, and I'm always like, I don't know. I'm always skeptical, but I really do believe this is going to be kind of a breakout album for us. And Just, we're just grinding. We're in the band room again. We have nothing to do, nowhere to go. We've got a tour in Mexico tentatively. We'll see if this happens, but we're supposed to be getting back out on the road in March, and we're going to start US at least. And then we've got this thing in Mexico. Hopefully we can get our European stuff rescheduled, but yeah, early next year, we're going to try to stretch our legs out and get back out there, start promoting and playing some new songs live. But for now, it's really just focusing on making sure we put out the best damn album we can write. So that's it.
Awesome. Thank
Perfect.
you.
So thank you, Justin, for coming on. And with that, Aaliyah.
Everyone, until next time, make like a bull and throw those horns up.